All right, so we are recording now. Good morning. So the what we covered last lecture is we discussed this theorem of Little, right, which tells you that a bipartite graph, is not Pfaffian if and only if it has a conformal subgraph that is a bisubdivision of K33, right? So one example is the Heawood graph plus one edge. Once you add one edge, this subgraph H, which is basically G minus U minus V. This becomes a conformal subgraph because when you delete the vertices, the remaining graph is a K2 which has a perfect matching. And this subgraph H is a bisubdivision of K33. Therefore, this graph is non-Pfaffian. But the difficult direction of Little's theorem says that whenever a bipartite graph is non-Pfaffian, there has to be such a subgraph in it. It is a conformal subgraph and it is a bisubdivision of K33, right? So this theorem is very similar to in spirit. It's similar in spirit to Krutowski's theorem. Right? Do you agree? Good morning, Anand. So we just started and I was going over Little's theorem that we discussed in the last lecture. Thanks. So I just want to remind you of Little's theorem. It says that a bipartite graph is not Pfaffian if and only if there is a conformal subgraph that is a bisubdivision of K33. Is the statement clear? Okay. So whenever a bipartite graph is not Pfaffian, it is because of K33, but not as a subdivision. It is a conformal subdivision and it is a bisubdivision. Sorry, my phone needs to be silent. Okay, sorry. So there are some differences, of course. Instead of non-planarity, we are looking at non-Pfaffian property. We are looking at non-Pfaffian instead of non-planar. And instead of subdivision, we have bisubdivision plus conformality property instead of just subdivisions. Right? So it's really similar to Krutowski's theorem. Okay. And I think I wrote here co-NP characterization of non-Pfaffian. I should write co-NP characterization of Pfaffian because co-NP automatically means that we are looking at not having the Pfaffian property. Okay, so whenever a bipartite graph is not Pfaffian, you can convince that the other person that it is not Pfaffian by showing them an appropriate subgraph. Okay. But the question still remains, how would you convince someone that a bipartite graph is Pfaffian? So using Little's theorem, you may convince someone that a bipartite graph is not Pfaffian. But the question still remains, what about the other question? How do you convince someone that a bipartite graph is Pfaffian? So in the case of bipartite graphs, this question has actually been answered. This was a major result in 1999-2000 due to this problem has been solved by McQuaig, who published his paper in 2006, although I believe the work was done much earlier. and also by Robertson, Seymour, and Thomas. Their publication was in 1999. And these are gigantic papers. One of them is an 80-page paper, the other one is 50 pages. So yeah, this is a non-trivial question to answer, fairly non-trivial. Okay, but I might tell you what the theorem is in the next lecture. Okay, are there any questions or concerns? So in fact, not only that, um, the problem is polytime solvable. So you can actually decide whether a bipartite graph is Pfaffian or not in polynomial time. Okay, good. All right, so before we go there, I want to tell you about a very important concept in matching theory called the tight cut breakdown procedure. In most literature, we call it the tight cut decomposition procedure. But because we had a different definition of decomposition in early lectures, I don't want to use this term. Okay, so I'll try to say tight cut breakdown. Okay, so I believe tight cuts are also on assignment 4, so you may have already seen it. So let me start with an example. Consider this graph. It's like K33, but one vertex has been expanded into a triangle. Okay, so if you think of this triangle as a single vertex, it's actually the graph K33. Okay, I want you to look at this cut. So this side is x and this side is x bar, and C is the cut partial of x. So this is a matching covered graph. You can easily check that. Okay, so this for this lecture and the next one, we will be talking mostly about matching covered graphs. So I'm just going to write the abbreviation here. So we have got a matching covered graph and we have got this cut. This cut has a beautiful property, which is the following, and you will see why it is beautiful soon. Notice that this cut meets every perfect matching in exactly one edge. Because, well, what are the alternatives? It is an odd cut. There is an odd number of vertices on both sides. So either you have to use one edge in a perfect matching or you have to use all three edges, right? You have to use an odd number of edges. So if you use all three edges, then you are in trouble, because then you cannot match these two vertices, right? So it's clear that for every perfect matching, you have to use exactly one of these edges, one of these three edges. Okay. So this kind of a cut is called a tight cut. And on assignment 4, you have been asked to prove that whenever you have a tight cut, you can get smaller matching covered graphs from the original graph. I need one more thing. Tight cut is non-trivial. It is non-trivial if both sides x and x bar have at least three vertices. Well, it has to be an odd number. So what this is really saying is that it should not be a single vertex, because a single vertex, the set of edges is always a tight cut, right? By definition of perfect matching. Such a cut is called a trivial tight cut. Okay, so why do we care about tight cuts? Well, whenever you have a tight cut, so let me make this example again quickly. Whenever you have a tight cut, what you can do is you can contract the two sides to single vertices. So first what I will do is I will shrink the triangle into a single vertex, and I will call that vertex little x. So this is actually K33 in this example. And the other thing I can do is I can shrink x bar to a single vertex. And in this example, this is K4. What is really worth noting is that whenever this graph is matching covered, both of these graphs will be matching covered. This you have to prove on assignment 4, and it's not difficult to prove. So G is a tight cut, and sorry, G is the matching covered graph. My bad. C is a tight cut. So the proposition is that both the C contractions. So what are C contractions? These are called the C contractions of the graph. You first shrink x into a single vertex, and then you shrink x bar into a single vertex. So these are the C contractions of G. So then the claim says that both C contractions of the graph G are matching covered. Okay, so I won't prove this. This is on assignment 4. Okay. Any questions regarding what tight cuts are and what this tight cut contraction business is? Okay. None. In particular, if C is a non-trivial tight cut, then each of these C contractions, let's call them G1 and G2, then the number of vertices in Gi is strictly smaller than the number of vertices in G, right? Because you had at least 3 vertices and you shrunk it into a single vertex. So the number of vertices has to go down, right? And so what happens is you get 2 smaller matching covered graphs from your original matching covered graph. Okay. And now you can repeat this process. So you take your graph G, you find a tight cut, and you take the C contractions, G1 and G2. So non-trivial tight cut, C. And now these are your 2 C contractions. Now if one of these graphs has a non-trivial tight cut, then you can repeat this process. If G1 has a non-trivial tight cut, let's say D, then you will get 2 graphs, G3 and G4, right? These are your D contractions. And you can keep doing this recursively. At the end of this binary tree, once you keep applying these non-trivial tight cut contractions, you'll get a bunch of matching covered graphs. And these graphs do not have any non-trivial tight cuts, right? At some point, this has to stop because your graphs are becoming smaller and smaller. So you can't go on forever, right? So this procedure, right. So Anand, there's a nice question. Is there a characterization of graphs with, right, graphs with non-trivial tight cuts? Yes. So I'm going to come to that in a second. So I won't write down the formal definition, right? I mean, you get the idea. So this procedure is called the tight cut decomposition procedure. Okay. Um, right. So the main point is that by applying the tight cut decomposition procedure, to any matching covered graph, we obtain a finite list, of course, of matching covered graphs. And these graphs have no non-trivial tight cuts that do not have any non-trivial tight cuts. Okay, good. All right. So I am going to answer Anand's question now. Right. So what Anand is asking is, what are these graphs? Is there any characterization of them? Well, he asked the opposite. He said, what are the graphs that have non-trivial tight cuts? Right. So, well, let's think about the other way around. What are the graphs that do not have any non-trivial tight cuts? So these graphs can be bipartite or they can be non-bipartite, right? And turns out for both of them, you have nice characterizations. So the bipartite graphs in this list are called braces. And this is on assignment 4. So on assignment 4, you are going to prove characterizations of bipartite matching covered graphs that do not have any non-trivial tight cuts. Okay. And the non-bipartite graphs are called bricks. I'm going to put this in double quotes because on the assignment 5, I have defined bricks differently. And you will be proving that these two definitions are equivalent. Okay. So one way to define bricks is they are non-bipartite matching covered graphs that do not have any non-trivial tight cuts. But there is another very nice definition which basically answers Anand's question. And that's the other way to define, or that's the other way to describe these bricks. Okay. So in our example, we did one tight cut decomposition application, right? We found a tight cut, non-trivial tight cut, and we got the 2C contractions. In this particular example, K33 is actually a brace. So you cannot break it down any further. And K4 is actually a brick. I'm always going to put brick in double quotes because I'm using a different definition on the assignment. And proving these two definitions are equivalent is a part of your assignment 5 problems. Okay. So K4 is a brick, K33 is a brace. So you cannot break down this graph any further. Okay. Any questions or concerns? Okay. Right. So these are alternative characterizations there are alternative characterizations of these graphs that you will be proving on the assignments. Okay. Good. All right. But there is another very interesting question that arises. Supposing I have a certain graph, G, and let's say all of you, Shayani, Anand, Kalyani, all of you have the same graph. Okay. And I apply tight cuts and I get some tight cut decomposition procedure of my graph, the graph G, and I get a bunch of bricks and braces, right? So the bipartite ones are called braces and the non-bipartite ones are called bricks. And you all do the same. You all apply the tight cut decomposition procedure to the same graph, but we do not communicate with each other. So I choose tight cuts the way I like, and you choose tight cuts the way you like. And then we compare the list of graphs we have. Are these going to be the same graphs or are they going to be different? Okay. Every time you have such a procedure, it's tempting to ask, is this unique or is the result of the procedure somehow unique? Okay. So let's write this down. If we apply the tight cut decomposition procedure to a graph in two different ways. Okay, so what I mean is the choice of tight cuts. Yeah, okay. So Anand has a question. Let me just take a look. If we can prove that no edge can be part of multiple tight cuts, we would get the same decomposition. Yes, that is true. Unfortunately, the claim is not true. So there are edges. An edge can be part of multiple tight cuts. So, okay, so I'll probably show you an example in a few minutes if I can find one. Okay, but if we apply the tight cut decomposition procedure to a graph G in two different ways, will the results be the same? Okay, so here is a nice example. It's a simple example, but it actually captures the point I want to make. So consider the following graph. Consider this graph. Okay, this is our graph G. Observe that these are tight cuts. So one of the tight cuts is colored red, and the other tight cut, I'm going to color it green. Okay. So if you look at the red tight cut, let's call the red tight cut C. Sorry, I should change the color again. So let's say the red tight cut is C and the green tight cut is D. Okay. And this is X and this is X bar. And on the green cut, the left side is Y and the right side is Y bar. Okay. It's a nice planar graph, which is easy to visualize. Okay, so what are the C contractions? Let's look at the C contractions. So in one case, so I want to draw the C contraction. So what I'll first draw is I will draw the X side. So the X side is this part. And on the other side, I want to draw the X bar, and the X bar looks like this, right? Okay. And now let me draw the contraction vertices. So the contraction vertex is, this is called X bar. And two edges are going to this square here. And there is a third edge going down there. And there is a fourth edge going to the bottom vertex. So I have two edges like this. I have a third edge like this. And then I have a fourth edge like this. Does everybody agree? This is when I shrink X bar to a single vertex. And when I shrink x to a single vertex, what I will get is three edges going to the top vertex and one edge going here. In matching theory, we don't throw away the multiple edges, we keep them. Okay, there are never going to be any loops, but if there are multiple edges or parallel edges, we are going to keep them. Okay, because removing them can change the number of perfect matchings, so we are not going to meddle with them. Okay, so these are the C contractions of the graph, G1 and G2. What about the D contractions? Let's draw the D contractions. So first let me draw Y and Y bar. So what does Y look like? Y looks like this, the graph induced by Y. And the graph induced by Y bar looks like this, right? And now let me put the contraction vertices. So how many edges do I have that are green colored? These two going to the quadrilateral and this one going to the top vertex. So these two and this one. Maybe I'll make the drawing a bit smaller so that you can see everything together. Okay. And then I have this vertex y, this is y and this is y bar. And now this vertex is going here and I have two edges going down. Okay. So these are my graphs, G1 prime and G2 prime. These are the D contractions, right? And these are the C contractions. So what do you see? Are they the same graphs or are they different? Can anyone tell me? Are these G1 and G2 the same as G1 prime and G2 prime? Also, I will tell you that this is the end of the tight cut decomposition because G1 and G1 prime are bricks and G2 and G2 prime are braces. So we cannot break these graphs any further. Okay. So are these the same graphs or do you see any difference?
So G2 and G2 prime. So there are
Right.
three parallel edges. Here is two parallel edges.
Exactly. Exactly. So that is the only difference between these two graphs. So observe that G1 and G2 are the same as G1 prime and G2 prime, except for multiplicities of edges. So what I mean by multiplicities, yes. So Anand has a point. Would the underlying simple graphs be the same? And that is a deep theorem. So okay, so now we are ready to state the theorem that I wanted to. Okay, so theorem due to Lowas 1987. Any two tight cut, any two applications of the tight cut decomposition procedure to a matching covered graph G yields the list, same lists, no, the same list of bricks and braces, except for the multiplicities of edges. Okay, so the only difference that can ever occur in between these two different lists is that you might have different multiplicities of edges. So in other words, if you look at the underlying simple graphs, they will be the same list. So not only will the number be the same, but the graphs will be the exact same. So if I get 2 copies of K33, 1 copy of K4, 1 copy of the Peterson graph, then any of you apply the same procedure, you will get the same graphs, except that you might get the Peterson graph with multiple edges, whereas I might get the Peterson graph that is simple. Okay. So in other words, the underlying simple graphs will be exactly the same. Okay, great. So this is a theorem of Lowas that we are not going to be proving. I will give you sources if in case you are interested in reading the proofs. I think I have a proof written up by myself, which basically Lowash's proof. I've written it in my own way. So I might make that available to you if I can locate it. Okay. Any questions or concerns? All right. Again, I should put bricks in double quotes. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So, not to get ahead, but how do we actually like prove a theorem like
Yeah,
this?
that is a very good point. I was expecting that question actually. All right. So maybe now that you have asked me this question, I think I'm going to include something on assignment 5, which is one of the main lemmas that Lowash exploits to prove this theorem. So what he, right, let me see. Yeah, I think I'll do that. So there is this very nice uncrossing lemma. So one of the main tools Lowash uses is called the uncrossing lemma. I'll So let me see if I can reproduce the statement of this lemma. So take two tight cuts. Again, the question will still arise, how do you use this lemma? I don't know if I'll be able to say much about that right now. So supposing you have a tight cut C, X and X bar. Okay. And we have seen this drawing before in the beginning of the course, so that will help. And you have another tight cut D, Y and Y bar. Okay. Notice that X is odd, right? Because it's a tight cut. So one of these boxes has to be an odd number of vertices and the other of them has to be an even number of vertices. You agree? Because the total number of vertices in the two boxes is odd, right? So let me call them the quadrants, right? So we get these 4 quadrants and one of these has to be odd, one of these has to be even. So let me adjust notation so that X intersection Y is odd. Adjust notation so that X intersection Y is odd. Otherwise, you relabel Y and Y bar. Okay, so if this is odd, then this has to be even. Now Y bar is odd, so this has to be odd and this has to be even. Okay, so this is what the two tight cuts, what these quadrants look like. So you have got 2 odd quadrants that are diagonally opposite and you've got 2 even quadrants that are diagonally opposite. Okay, now what you can prove quite easily, actually, you will be proving it on the assignment now that I have just announced it. So you can show that this is a tight cut. So show that partial of x intersection y is a tight cut. Okay, and of course, by symmetry, the other side is also going to be a tight cut. Partial of x bar intersection y bar. So, okay. And this is one of the main tools that Lowash uses in order to prove his results. So the proof is by induction, and he makes very clever use of this lemma. Okay, so the proof is by induction and makes clever use of this lemma. But it's not actually a very long proof. So if you're interested, you can actually read it. It's about well, it's about 5-7 pages. It's not like a 50-page proof or anything, right? So what he does is he takes two families of tight cuts, and let's see, how do I explain this part? Yeah, it's a bit tricky to explain all the parts of the proof, but yeah, he uses this lemma in a very clever way to prove the theorem by induction. I think I'll just say that much right now, and I'll provide you with the source. Is that good?
So just one small question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So over here, you should also have a condition that the two tight cuts C and D must be edge disjoint with each other, right?
Not necessarily. So the way he makes use of that, you don't need them to be edge disjoint. So yeah. Let me see. Yeah, so you don't need them to be edge disjoint. What is true, however, is that there cannot be any edge from here to there. I think this is true, because if there was an edge like this, then so I think no, so these two cuts need not be edge disjoint. So that is not necessary for proving the theorem. Right? But yeah, I mean, the result is non-trivial enough that giving more details is going to be a bit tricky. But yeah, I'll share a write-up with you. So I have my own write-up where I explain this proof, and I'll put that on Piazza so that you can go through the proof, or at least you can skim through the proof and see what the main points are. Yeah. Any other questions or concerns? So yeah, it is I mean, yeah, it is a fairly non-trivial result, but the implication is really beautiful because it tells you that for any matching covered graph, the list of bricks and braces is exactly the same, right? And what this theorem was part of a bigger result that Lowash proved that I don't have the time to discuss because I would have to go into some polyhedral combinatorics to explain that. But although that was Lowash's motivation, it has found lots of other uses, including in Pfaffian orientations. Right? So the significance of this result is that many interesting properties including Pfaffian orientations. For many interesting properties, one needs to only understand the bricks and braces. So I want you to remember about three connected graphs. If you recall, when we wanted to prove Krutowski's theorem, we first reduced the problem to three connected graphs. And then we proved the statement for three connected graphs, right? You also had a writing exercise where you first solve the problem for three connected graphs, and then it has some implications for all graphs. So three connected graphs play a very important role in graph theory, especially in planarity and other areas, right? In the same way, bricks and braces, these special graphs, these special matching covered graphs, they play an important role in matching theory. So for many problems like Pfaffian orientations, you don't need to understand, you don't need to study all the matching covered graphs. You can just study the bricks and braces. And if you answer questions for bricks and braces, you can answer questions for all graphs or all matching covered graphs. Okay. So one such example is Pfaffian orientations. So okay. Yeah, so in this part of the course, there are lots of results that I'm not proving because proving each of them would require a whole week or so, right? So I'll just give you sources where you can read the proofs, but essentially this is like compressing a matching theory course into 2 weeks, which could be a whole course by itself, right? So I don't know when I'll be able to offer that because there is not a lot of demand for these kinds of courses. All right, so what is the point I want to make regarding tight cuts and Pfaffian orientations? Because our main focus right now is Pfaffian orientations. So why do we care about these tight cuts and bricks and braces? So here is the reason we care. Supposing I give you a graph. So I like this drawing. This is one way to think about what's going on. Supposing I give you a tight cut C, and this is X and this is X bar, right? So what are we doing? We are taking the graph induced by X, and then we are shrinking the graph induced by X bar to a single vertex, right? So if there are 4 edges here, then you're going to get 4 edges incident at X bar, right? So this is one of the C contractions, G1. And the other C contraction is I keep X bar as it is, and I shrink X to a single vertex, right? This is G2. And this is our graph G. So you can ask the question, if G is non-Pfaffian and this C is a tight cut, then what can we say about G1 and G2? Okay, any guesses? Supposing I know that the graph is non-Pfaffian, then what can you say about these two smaller graphs? What do you think should be true? Intuitively, what seems to make sense? So basically, I want to state a theorem. I want you to guess the statement of the theorem. So a lot of things in non-Pfaffianness is similar to non-planarity, right? So supposing you were doing the same thing with planarity. So if the whole graph is non-planar, then is this true? Actually, maybe it's not true for planarity. Okay. Right. So turns out the following is true, and we will prove one direction of this theorem. The graph G is non-Pfaffian if and only if at least one of G1 and G2 is non-Pfaffian. Okay, so the theorem has this whole setup. You have a matching covered graph G, and C is a tight cut, and G1 and G2 are the C contractions. And then the theorem says that the graph is non-Pfaffian if and only if at least one of these two C contractions is non-Pfaffian. Right? Good. And what does this imply? Well, you can keep doing this procedure of tight cut decomposition iteratively, and then this theorem says that your original graph is non-Pfaffian if and only if at least one of the bricks and braces is non-Pfaffian. Right? You're just applying this theorem recursively. So, a matching covered graph G is non-Pfaffian if and only if at least one of the bricks and braces of G is non-Pfaffian. You might ask me, what about the multiple edges? Because if I apply the tight cut decomposition procedure, I get some bricks and braces. And if Kalyani, for example, applies the tight cut decomposition procedure, she might get a different list of bricks and braces. We know by Lowaas' theorem that these lists are the same except for multiple edges. Interestingly, the Pfaffian property does not depend on multiple edges. This is actually quite easy to prove. So I'll give it as a do it yourself. So a graph G is Pfaffian if and only if the underlying simple graph of G is Pfaffian. This is easy. And you kind of expect this, right? You expect multiple edges to not play a big role. So what this result is saying is that they don't matter. Although there are multiple edges and we are going to keep them in matching theory, in the context of Pfaffian orientations, multiple edges actually don't matter. Okay, so this is just think about it. You'll be able to prove it quite easily. Okay, so when I say bricks and braces of the graph, what I mean is the underlying simple graphs. So in our example, where we had multiple edges, if you go back to this example, this graph G1 is actually I call it C6 complement plus one edge. It's basically this graph. You have you've seen this graph many times, and you add one edge to it. So this is a brick of G. This is the brick of G. It's only one brick. And this graph G2, well, it's C4 with multiple edges. And the same for this guy, right? C4 with multiple edges. So the brace of G, the braces of G are just C4. Okay. So the theorem is saying that the graph is Pfaffian, or the graph is non-Pfaffian if at least one of the bricks and braces is non-Pfaffian. So that means that you don't need to understand all the Pfaffian graphs. You don't need to look at all matching covered graphs. You can restrict yourself to the bricks and braces. Okay. So that is the point I wanted to make in today's lecture. And I think we have gotten there. So our original problem from a few lectures ago was to characterize Pfaffian matching covered graphs. And because of this corollary, we can now restrict to characterize Pfaffian bricks and braces. Okay. And if we solve this problem, then it turns out that we have solved the entire problem. So suffices to solve this problem. So somebody from a CS theory background might be motivated to ask, can we get the bricks and braces in polynomial time? For any graph, can I obtain the bricks and braces in polynomial time? Because every time I need to find a tight cut, and only then can I get the C contractions with respect to that tight cut, right? So the answer is yes. Finding a tight cut is polynomial time doable. So you can actually efficiently compute the bricks and braces from any graph. So I'll just state that as a remark. The bricks and braces of any matching covered graph G may be computed efficiently. Right. So yeah, this is also due to a deep result of Edmonds, Lowas, and Poulieblanc. A deep result of Edmonds, Lowas, and Poulieblanc, 1982. And some of this stuff, well, the easy part of this result will be on the assignment 5. Okay. So in fact, an interesting remark is that when Edmonds, Lowas, and Poulieblanc proved this, they used linear programming techniques. But now there are completely graph theoretical proofs of these results. But they require more work. So sometimes in graph theory, applying linear algebraic techniques or even probabilistic techniques can produce shorter proofs. But well, it's still interesting to have graph theoretical proofs of these results. Okay. So are there any questions or concerns regarding this main point? So we don't need to look at all the matching covered graphs in the world. We just need to look at the bricks and braces. And if we solve the problems for bricks and braces, we will solve the problem for all matching covered graphs. Right? And that will solve the problem for all graphs because of reasons we have discussed earlier. Right. Okay. So any questions or concerns? So maybe I'll post some notes today, especially the proof of Lowash's theorem. So you can take a look at that and see what the main ideas are. But as I told you, one of the main techniques that Lowash uses is the uncrossing lemma. And he uses it very innovatively to get a proof by induction. Okay. Good. All right. So, yeah, if there are no more questions or concerns, feel free to leave the meeting. Tomorrow might be the last lecture, but I will announce that tomorrow itself.